Hello everyone, this is Dr. Shivani Chaturvedi and this lecture is about aphakia. So let's begin with the basic definition of aphakia. It refers to complete absence of crystalline lens in the eye. Normally, the crystalline lens plays a crucial role in focusing light onto the retina, contributing significantly to the eye's refractive power. However, in aphakia, the lens is missing. As a result, the lens is absent from the pupillary area and therefore it does not participate in the process of refraction. This leads to major reduction in the eye's focusing ability. Now let's look at the causes of aphakia. Firstly, congenital absence of lens. This is a rare condition where the lens fails to develop during intrauterine life and it may be associated with other ocular or systemic anomalies. Second, surgical aphakia, which is most common cause. This typically occurs after cataract extraction when an intraocular lens is not implanted. Third, aphakia can occur due to absorption of lens matter. Next, traumatic exclusion of the lens. In severe ocular injuries, the lens may be expelled out from the eye. Finally, surgical or spontaneous dislocation of the lens. In some cases, the lens may get displaced posteriorly into the vitreous cavity or anteriorly, effectively making the pupillary area lens free. Now, let's understand the optics of aphakia, which is very important to explain the visual changes seen in these patients. First, there is significant change in the cardinal data of the eye because the crystalline lens contribute a major portion of eye's refractive power. With the lens absent, the eye becomes highly hypermetropic, meaning the eye loses its converging power and images tend to focus behind the retina. Normally, the total power of the human eye is around plus 60 diopters, but in aphakia, it reduces to approximately plus 44 diopters due to loss of the lens power. Because of this, the anterior focal point shifts posteriorly to about 31 millimeters behind the cornea, and at the same time, the posterior focal point moves forward, coming close to the anterior surface of the cornea. The nodal points also shifts and are located about 7.75 millimeters behind the anterior surface of the cornea, altering the image formation within the eye. Another very important point is total loss of accommodation since the lens is responsible for adjusting focus for near vision. So overall, in aphakia, there are major changes in the optical system of the eye, especially in the cardinal points and image formation, which explains the significant visual impairment seen in these patients. Starting with symptoms, patient typically presents with defective vision for both near and distance. This occurs because the lens, which is responsible for fine focusing and accommodation, is absent. And coming to the signs, firstly, a limbal scar may be seen, especially in cases of surgical aphakia following cataract extraction. And the anterior chamber becomes deeper than normal. This is because the lens, which normally occupies space behind the iris, is absent. Another important sign is that pupil appears jet black in color. This happens because there is no lens to reflect light, so the pupil looks unusually dark. And on performing the Purkinje image test, only 2 images are seen instead of 4 due to absence of reflections from the lens surfaces. During the fundus examination, the optic disc may appear small or hypermetropic due to optical changes in the eye. And finally, retinoscopy reveals high hypermetropia, which is a key refractive finding in aphakia. This diagram shows the formation of Purkinje images, which are reflections formed at different refractive surfaces of the eye. There are normally 4 Purkinje images. The first image is formed from the anterior surface of the cornea, the second image from the posterior surface of the cornea, the third image from the anterior surface of the lens, and the fourth image is formed from the posterior surface of the lens. These images help us clinically assess the presence and position of the crystalline lens. Now, in aphakia, the crystalline lens is absent. So, the third and fourth Purkinje images, which are formed by the lens surfaces, are missing. Therefore, only 2 Purkinje images are seen, those from the corneal surfaces. This is an important clinical sign used to confirm aphakia during examination. Now moving on to the treatment modalities of aphakia. The basic optical principle in managing aphakia is to replace the lost refractive power of the crystalline lens. And this is done by using convex lenses to appropriate power so that light rays can again be properly focused onto the retina. And there are four main methods of correction. Firstly, spectacles. These are high plus convex lenses that correct vision, but they have some disadvantages such as image magnification, distortion, and reduced peripheral vision. Then there are contact lenses. These provide better optical quality compared to the spectacles with less image magnification and a wider field of vision. They are specially used in unilateral aphakia. And then there are intraocular lenses. This is most commonly preferred and physiological method today. An artificial lens is implanted inside the eye, restoring the near normal optics. And finally, refractive corneal surgeries may be considered in selected cases, though it is less commonly used compared to IOL implantation. So overall, the goal of treatment is to restore visual function by compensating for the missing lens, with intraocular lenses being the most effective and widely used option. And let's now focus on the use of spectacles in correction of aphakia. Spectacles are most commonly used method, especially in settings where surgical options or contact lenses are not feasible. Typically, a high plus convex lens of around plus 10 diopters is prescribed for distance vision. This helps compensate for the loss of crystalline lens power. However, since accommodation is completely lost in aphakia, patients also require additional near correction. Usually, an extra plus 3 to plus 4 diopters is added for near work, such as reading. While specs is simple and cost effective, they do have several disadvantages. There is about 30% image magnification, which can disturb vision. They also cause spherical and chromatic aberration due to thick lenses, and the glasses are heavy and produce prismatic effect leading to discomfort. And also, they are not suitable for unilateral aphakia because of image size difference between the two eyes. So while convenient, specs have significant limitations. Let's understand spherical aberration, an important optical defect. It occurs when the light rays passing through different parts of the spherical lens do not converge at a single focal point. This happens because the peripheral rays, those passing through the edges of the lens, are bent more strongly than the central or paraaxial rays. So coming to the first diagram, we see a perfect lens without spherical aberration. All the incoming parallel light rays, whether passing through the center or the periphery, converges at the single focal point. This results in a sharp, clear image on the retina. Now in the second diagram, we see lens with spherical aberration. The peripheral rays are refracted more strongly and come in focus in front of the central rays, and the central rays focus further back. So instead of a one focal point, there are multiple focal points along the optical axis, leading to blurred image. So because of this, the patient may experience blurred vision, halos, glare, and reduced contrast sensitivity. Also, spherical aberration increases with larger pupil size because more peripheral rays enters the eye. Now in the first image, peripheral rays focus in front of the central rays. This happens in cases of positive spherical aberration, which is common in normal cornea, myopic eyes, and it causes reduced contrast and night vision issues. In the second image, the peripheral rays are focused behind the central rays, and this happens in cases of negative spherical aberration, which is seen in aging crystalline lens or some of the intraocular lenses. Now let's understand chromatic aberration, which is particularly significant in aphakic spectacles due to their high plus power. So chromatic aberration is an optical phenomena where different wavelength of light are refracted by different amount because the refractive index of the lens varies with the wavelength. So light of different colors does not focus at the same point, leading to image distortion. Shorter wavelength light like blue light refracted more strongly and are focused earlier, and longer wavelength light like red light are refracted less strongly and are focused later. So in the diagram, we can see white light is entering the lens, which splits into blue and red rays, and the blue rays are more deviated and are focused earlier than the red rays. The blue rays focus is closer to the lens and the red rays are focused further away. This difference along the optical axis is called longitudinal chromatic aberration, and when the rays passes through the periphery of the lens, different colors are displaced sideways. This produces colored fringes at the edges of the objects known as lateral chromatic aberration. So the object appears with red and blue colored fringes, especially at a high contrast edges. This causes blur and reduced image clarity. In aphakia, high plus convex lenses are used, which have strong prismatic effects, especially at the periphery. So chromatic aberration is more pronounced, and patients often complain of colored halos or fringes, especially in the peripheral vision. It contributes to visual distortion and discomfort. Also, it is the basis of duochrome test, which is used in the refraction. And many modern lenses try to reduce this using a low dispersion material. So chromatic aberration occurs due to unequal refraction of different wavelengths, and in aphakic glasses it leads to colored fringes and reduced visual quality. Now let's discuss an important optical defect seen in high plus lenses called roving ring scotoma. In high plus lenses, the edges of the lens act like a prism. Specifically, they act as a base and prism. So when the light rays strike the periphery of the lens, they are bent towards the center. Because of this strong prismatic effect, some light rays from the peripheral objects are deviated away from the pupil. Therefore, these rays do not enter the eye. As a result, a part of visual field is not seen, creating a blind area. And this effect occurs all round the edge of the lens, so the blind area forms a ring-shaped zone surrounding the central vision field. Now coming to the diagram, which shows light rays entering through the central and peripheral part of the lens, the central rays passes normally into the pupil and the peripheral rays are deviated away due to the prismatic effect. The area labeled as unrefracted area represents the region where rays fail to enter the eye, and the shaded region represents the ring scotoma, typically around 50 to 65 degree in the visual field. The central circle shows the normal visual field and the dark ring surrounding it represents the ring scotoma. And objects in this ring are not perceived by the patient. So why is it called roving? Because the scotoma is not fixed. As the eye moves behind the spectacles, the position of the blind area shifts. So the scotoma appears to move or rove, hence the name roving ring scotoma. Now, patient may complain that objects suddenly disappear or reappear at the periphery, and there will be difficulty in mobility, especially walking or crossing the roads. So, roving ring scotoma is a ring-shaped peripheral blind area caused by the prismatic effect of high plus lenses, and it shifts with eye movement, leading to significant visual disturbance. Now, I will explain an interesting visual phenomena seen in patients wearing high plus aphakic glasses called jack-in-the-box phenomena. This refers to sudden appearance or disappearance of objects in the peripheral visual field. It occurs due to the presence of ring scotoma created by high plus lenses. As discussed earlier, high plus lenses produce a roving ring scotoma. This creates a blind ring zone in the mid-peripheral field. Objects located in this zone are not visible to the patients. So when an object lies within the scotoma, it is not seen. And as the patient moves their eyes or head, the object suddenly enters the visual field. So the object appears to pop into the view suddenly. This is why it is called jack in the box, like a toy suddenly popping out. Bottom diagram. Left image, the object lies between the approximately 50 to 65 degree within the ring scotoma, and light rays from this object do not reaches the retina. So the object is not perceived. And in the right image, when the patient moves the eye, the image shifts so that the rays now passes through the central part of the lens, and the object now becomes visible suddenly. So key point here is that the object was always present, but it was hidden in the scotoma and then suddenly appears. The clinical significance is it can be very disturbing and confusing for the patient. Also, the patient feels that the objects are suddenly appearing and jumping into the view, which causes difficulty in walking, driving, or detecting obstacles. So, jack in the box phenomena is a sudden appearance or disappearance of peripheral objects due to their movement into or out of the ring scotoma in high plus lenses. Coming to pin cushion distortion, which is common in high plus lenses, because the magnification is not uniform, the periphery of the lens produces greater magnification than the center. This happens due to the prismatic effect of the lens, and this causes increasing image displacement outwards. So what the patient sees, when the patient sees the straight line, it appears bowed outwards and the object appears stretched, elongated radially and closer or larger at the edges. This gives a pin cushion appearance, like the surface of the cushion is pulled at the corners. Now in the top right grid, the original object is square. After passing through the plus lens, the edges are magnified more and the grid lines bend outwards. So the image bulges at the periphery, which is called pincushion distortion. In the bottom middle image, the face appears stretched outward at the edges and distorted, especially in the peripheral regions. It demonstrates how patient perceives the real world objects. What is the effect on the vision? The straight lines appear curved. An object in motion may appear faster in periphery or distorted in shape. Also, one line about the barrel distortion. This is seen in high minus lenses. It is opposite to the pincushion distortion. And here the peripheral magnification is less than the central magnification and lens behaves like a basin prism at the periphery. So straight line appears curved inwards and object looks compressed at the edges and shrunken peripherally. So it gives a barrel shaped appearance like the sides of the barrel. How objects appear to move in patients wearing high plus lenses. So this phenomena is commonly referred as swim or apparent motion distortion. So what happened in high plus lenses, there is a strong prismatic effect, especially in the peripheral part of the lens, and the lens behaves like a series of prisms. So when the head moves while the eyes remain fixed, the object appears to move in the opposite direction. This is called reverse motion of the visual field. So plus lenses produces a base in prismatic effect in the direction of head movement. Due to this, the image shifts towards the apex of the prism and the eye follows this shifted image. This creates an illusion that the object is moving against the direction of the movement. In the diagram, it shows that as an object comes closer, it subtends a larger visual angle. And in high plus lenses, the object appears magnified. So they are interpreted by the brain as being closer than they actually are. And this misjudgment contributes to illusion of movement. So because of the magnification, object appears closer and the hand-eye coordination becomes difficult. For example, while pouring a tea, the patient may misjudge the distance and this can lead to error like overpouring or missing the cup. So an object appears to move or swim and shifts position with head movement, and straight paths may feel unstable. This is especially noticeable while walking or during head movements or in unfamiliar environments. So how can we reduce the effect? Instead of moving only the eyes, we can move head and eyes together slowly. Also avoid rapid head movements and keep the fixation stable when possible. Also with aphakic spectacles, there is significant restriction of visual field, both monoocular and binocular, up to about 50%. Patient may also notice color vision changes, especially a bluish tinge known as synopsia due to loss of natural lens filter. Additionally, these glasses can cause cosmetic issues as they make the eye appear enlarged. They are also thick and heavy, which can be uncomfortable and cosmetically unappealing. So apart from the optical issues, there are functional and cosmetic limitations as well. Now coming to the contact lenses in aphakia, they provide better optical quality with less image magnification and there is no chromatic or prismatic aberration. They also offer a wider field of vision and are cosmetically more acceptable. Importantly, they are especially used in unilateral aphakia as they reduces the image size difference between the two eyes. However, they have some disadvantages like higher cost and it can be difficult to handle, especially in children and elderly, and may lead to corneal complications with improper use. So overall, contact lenses are optically superior but require good patient's compliance. Different types of contact lenses can be used in aphakia depending on the condition. RGP lenses are preferred in cases with high corneal astigmatism or distortion. Hydrogel lenses are used in low astigmatism or in patients who cannot tolerate RGP lenses. Then silicone lenses are especially useful in pediatric aphakia due to better oxygen permeability. Scleral lenses are indicated in severe corneal distortion. Lastly, tinted lenses help by reducing glare and providing UV protection. So lens choice depends on the corneal status, patient's age and tolerance. Coming to the intraocular lenses, which are most preferred method for aphakia correction today. They provide minimal image magnification with no spherical or prismatic aberration and almost no anisoconia, giving near normal vision. They also maintain a normal peripheral field and are cosmetically acceptable. However, they involve intraocular surgery, so there are risks like surgical complications, IOL dislocations, and posterior capsular opacifications. They also require skilled surgeons and proper facilities, and cost is higher. Overall, despite these limitations, intraocular lenses offer the most physiological visual rehabilitation. Today, the most common way to correct aphakia is by implanting an intraocular lens. The first successful IOL implantation was performed by Sir Harold Ridley in 1949. His original lens was made of PMMA and placed in the posterior chamber. Since then, with advances in surgical techniques and lens design, IOL implantation has become one of the most successful and routinely performed procedure in ophthalmology. For surgical aphakia, this slide summarizes the approach to secondary intraocular lens implantation, which is considered when primary IOL placement is not possible or has failed. The key factor guiding our decision is availability of capsular or iris support. If there is intact posterior capsule with adequate capsular support, a in-back PC IOL can be implanted, which is most physiological option. If the capsular support is inadequate, we look at the iris support. If sufficient iris tissue is present, an iris claw or iris fixated IOL can be used. Or if there is no capsule nor iris support is adequate, then a scleral fixated IOL is preferred. So the choice of secondary IOL depends on the ocular structures available, and the aim is always to achieve stable fixation and optimal visual outcomes. Lastly, coming to corneal refractive surgery, which is another option of aphakia, though less commonly used. In keratophakia, a lenticule from the donor cornea is placed within the patient's corneal layers, and in epikeratophakia, the lenticule is stitched onto the corneal surface after removing the epithelium. And also we can perform hyperopic LASIK to correct the hypermetropia. And these methods aim to increase the corneal power, but are now less preferred compared to intraocular lens implantation. Now, coming to the complications of aphakia, which can be broadly divided into optical, functional, and long-term complications. The optical complications include hypermetropia. In aphakia, the crystalline lens is absent, which normally contributes to plus 16 to plus 18 diopters. As a result, the eye becomes highly hypermetropic, and the patient cannot focus on the near or even distant objects without correction. And the next one is anisoconia. This refers to difference in the image size between the two eyes, which is common in unilateral aphakia, especially with spectacle correction, and this leads to difficulty in fusion, diplopia, or poor binocular vision. Now, the functional complications include poor stereopsis. Due to loss of binocular vision, patients have reduced depth perception, and this affects activities like driving, climbing chairs, or hand-eye coordination. Also, there can be amblyopia, particularly seen in children with untreated aphakia, due to lack of clear image formation during visual development. And early correction is crucial to prevent permanent visual loss. The long-term complications include secondary glaucoma or retinal detachment. The patient may present with flashes, floaters, or sudden visual loss. Also, there can be cystoid macular edema or vitreous prolapse. In absence of lens support, the vitreous may move forward into the interior chamber, which can cause inflammation, corneal damage, or secondary glaucoma. So overall, aphakia affects not only refractive status but also binocular function and may lead to serious long-term complications, highlighting the importance of early correction and proper management. Now let's understand the visual difficulties in unilateral aphakia with a case-based scenario. So we have a 63-year-old patient, and the right eye is pseudophakic and the left eye is aphakic, which is corrected with spectacles, and the visual acuity in both eye is 6/6. So despite good visual acuity, the patient still has some complaints. So what are the possible complaints this patient may present with? So even if the visual acuity is good, the Patient commonly experience diplopia, which is due to inability to fuse the image, poor depth perception because of binocular vision is affected, and image distortion from high plus spectacle lenses, and misjudging steps or difficulty in walking, which can increases the risk of falls, and visual fatigue and eye strain due to constant efforts to fuse the image. And the key underlying problem is anisoconia, which means difference in image size between the two eyes. The aphakic eye with spectacle produces a magnified image around 25 to 30%, and the pseudophakic eye produces a near normal image. This significant size difference makes it difficult for the brain to fuse the two images. So this is why the spectacle correction is not preferred in unilateral aphakia, and the better options include contact lenses, or we can go for secondary IOL implantation. So even with normal visual acuity, unilateral aphakia corrected with spectacles leads to significant binocular visual problems, mainly due to anisoconia. To conclude, although aphakia causes profound optical changes, but with modern techniques, especially IOL implantation, aphakia is well managed today. I will be discussing the detailed management of aphakia with intraocular lens implantation in my upcoming lecture. Thank you.